20 years ago, I had a very open discussion with my son where I said that I can't remember a time where I haven't woken up a little bit scared. And my son privately had a bit of a hug and we talked about it. We talked about the fact that isn't that for everyone? We all live every day with tiny little niggling fears. No one gets out of this alive. We've all got to survive it. And that's all I think I've done is survived it.
David Gregory, welcome. John and I are so excited to have a conversation with you today.
As am I. I'm really looking forward to it.
David, as we do with all of our podcasts, we start off with a question. What has been a key challenge or event in your life that's actually had significant impact on you?
Well, I'd like to be a little challenging to you in that because I have had quite an interesting and bizarre life. I identify with a number of challenges that I face. I have a bit of a belief in relation to fear, that fear is a spectrum. It ranges from momentary through to debilitating and from reluctance through to flight. And it's how you respond to those that defines you. And so when I look through my somewhat eclectic background, there are common elements, but there is an overarching facing of fears or facing of challenges that has made me who I am today. When I looked at the chronology, I left home when I was 14 years of age. Moved into a flat in the back of a mate's place, and the fear of loneliness, the family issues, there were some challenging times that led to me leaving home at 14. I almost went bankrupt at one stage in my life. I was with Coles Myer and I went out and started an advertising company. I became the CEO of the Small Business Mentoring Service. And with that, as you both appreciate, one of the greatest challenges out there at the moment is imposter syndrome. And I think so many business executives feel that. So becoming the CEO certainly led to that. I got to speak at the United Nations, and that was imposter syndrome, fear of failure, public speaking, all of the fears rolled into one. I headed the Small Business Mentoring Service through disasters like Black Saturday and bushfires, floods, droughts, and that was a fear of impotence in that I didn't know if I could help these people or fear of failing them. I got an OAM, and while you would think that that's not a fear, there is a fear attached to living up to it, to say, well, now I've got it, I've got to keep delivering. And then bizarrely, I became a movie producer for a movie called Just a Farmer. The topic of that was farmer suicide. So it brought me into a whole different world of fears and challenges and what people in regional and rural areas face, as well as the financial impacts and the impacts on those that were involved in it. And lastly, I've been involved with Beyond Blue now for about 15, 16 years. I've run the gamut of those that are on the streets through to those that are impacted by disasters through to those that have mental health challenges. There's the plethora of things. Jump in on any one that you'd like.
It'd be great to touch on all of them, and I'm sure we will in certain ways. But one of my first questions to you, David, did all of those have any overarching fear that sort of was a pattern throughout each of those areas?
I think probably imposter syndrome is the biggest one that seems to have followed me throughout my life. And I think that unless you are an absolute narcissist, there's not too many business executives that don't feel it. I don't know that the people that they work with know that they have imposter syndrome, but I guarantee they do. Sometimes that can be debilitating, or you can seize the day and say, well, regardless, I've been given the chair, so I've got to sit in it and lead from it. And that seems to have come up along the way throughout my life. Having said that, I look at fear and say, you've got a choice of either running towards it or running from it. In running towards it, every good thing comes from you getting past this fear, getting beyond that and saying, I can see it in my rear vision mirror, and it wasn't anywhere near as scary as I thought it was.
I'm glad you spoke about this running towards it or running away from it, given that it's been a bit of a pattern and you've noticed this theme. Has your relationship to that imposter syndrome fear Has it changed over time, or each time it comes up, it's still just as big, and it's still a moment of, do I run towards it or run away from it?
I've got older. I've got possibly more mature, though some would question that. I've been able to compartmentalise it more. Having said that, I don't think I've ever lost it. So with all of those things, even today, public speaking is something that I absolutely hate. And those that know me and have been involved with me will say, but you're a really good public speaker. That's okay. I can be, but I doesn't mean I'm not terrified. It doesn't mean that I'm not going out the back and having a panic attack or being so stressed about it for the days or weeks before it.
It's really interesting you speak about running towards it. What coping mechanisms have you developed over the years with your public speaking, or any of those times where you've felt the fear, that have helped you go, I can do this, I can get myself through it?
First of all, I've adopted a philosophy for many years now of saying yes. When somebody asks me to do something, as you two did, I just say yes. And then I regret it immediately afterwards. And then I go through it and then I'm glad I did it. And I know that pattern repeats. So therefore, saying yes is a really good thing. I also think that there are no dreams that are achieved without having faced a fear. So fear is the thief of dreams. And if that's a truism, then you have to compartmentalise. You have to say, no, I'm going to go and do this. One stage in my life, my wife and I sold our house, bought a block of land and own a build. And my friends and family all said, you don't know how to build. This is doomed. This is an accident looking for a place to happen. It was the making of us. We built a beautiful home. We had a great life doing it. The children grew up knowing that mum and dad gave it their all. And it was absolutely bloody terrifying. But I'm so thrilled we did it. So look at that and every other instance along the way. And it's that compartmentalising it and saying, I will do it anyway. As far as strategies, when I'm going to give a speech on a stage, I'll normally go off to the toilets first hand and do the broad arms and big breaths so you build yourself up for it. I normally script the hell out of everything that I do and then throw the script away. So I script it, read it, and then throw it away because I know my muscle memory will take over then. And I also know that, as you'd be very much aware, it's the first 5 minutes. After the first 5 minutes, it's fine. You know your topic, so off you go.
David, correct me if I'm wrong. It seems like you've got these things that are pulling you through the first discomfort. So whether it's the first 5 minutes or the build up when you've got these messages about what it's going to be like. I've heard you use the word dream. Is it this idea that if I don't face this fear, I'm not going to meet my dream? So is it that's what's motivating you, that's pulling you through these fearful moments?
Yeah, when I first met my wife, she said that I was the stranger in amongst all of the people that she knew because I had a 5-year plan. All the way through, I've always had a plan for where I'm going to be or where I aspire to be. In order to do that, you divide that plan up. If it's a 5-year plan, you divide it into 5 and you say, where do I need to be by the first, the second, the third? What does halfway look like? What does success look like? As you both appreciate, very common business strategies. And it's that whole, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? Having said that, it is also that if you have imposter syndrome, by default, you have to overprove yourself in order to show yourself you're not an imposter, because those around you don't think you are. It's only you that thinks that. Then if you over-deliver on what people are expecting, then you can start to convince yourself you're all right.
I really want to spend a moment on that, knowing yourself you're not the imposter, because I think that's a really key point here. As you say, everybody else looks at you and go, wow, how magnificent the work you do and how you are in business and how you conduct yourself. Tell me a little bit more about your sense of I'm an imposter. How does that play out for you?
For me, it's on everything that I'm going towards, I'm compartmentalising into what I've got to do rather than seeing the other side of it. It's best to give you an example. I got to give a speech at the United Nations, and it was a wonderful experience to be involved in. I was terrified out of my mind, specifically because it was the UN, and secondly, it was a script that you had to write and then follow because they were translating it into other languages as you spoke it. So you couldn't go off script. I've never stayed on script in my life. So yeah, the concept of that added another level of fear. I went there and I did the job, and my wife and family all knew about it. And then I put it aside. This is a common thing with those that struggle with that space, is that your achievements only exist in the future. What you've just done doesn't matter anymore. It's gone now, so move on. It wasn't until about 4 years later that my wife and I were on a holiday, and we got to New York. I said, let's go to the UN. I want to show you where I gave my speech. And we went in there and I had tears running down my face. So did she. Neither of us had realised how actually important it was, because I'd never really relayed how important it was or how actually scared I was. It wasn't until I was able to share it with the person that I love that it really came home. Just that was big. I think that relates to most experiences that I went through in the chronology, is that once you've achieved them, they're done and dusted. You put them aside. Others might reflect, okay, you did that. I don't want to. I don't feel a need to. I don't feel that there is an end point. There are more future things to do.
Isn't it interesting though, David? I think you've made a really important point there about the things we do well, we just move away from very quickly. We move on and we get to the next. Yeah, if it didn't go well, we agonize over it and really take time out to look at what could have worked better. Do you think you miss some of the richness of learning by just moving on too quickly from those very wonderful experiences?
Yes.
Okay.
I think I take with me the richness of the learnings, but I don't take away the richness of the experience, because the experience is lived, and once lived is past. I will always be grateful for all of the challenges and opportunities that have come my way and that I've been able to get through or come out the other side. But I don't care about them anymore. That's an important distinction, because I look at lots that wear things as a badge. And for those with imposter syndrome, you don't get the badge. You're giving it to yourself. So that's just allowing you to do the next challenge and the next challenge. And that is all part of mental health. What I was saying with fear is a spectrum, and we all have mental health challenges. And I would suggest anyone that says that they don't is lying to themselves as much as they're lying to you.
To dive a little bit into what you said about receiving the OAM and about the point of you needing to keep delivering, and how that fear translates to this very day. Has that gone away? How's that feeling about keep delivering for you now as compared to where you started?
Yeah, it hasn't really changed. I look at it and say receiving it is a responsibility. And if you don't receive it with that in mind, then you shouldn't have got it. That allows me to sit at tables that I possibly didn't get to sit at before. It allows my voice to be heard a little louder than it was before. But it also comes with the responsibility to use that and actually make a difference with it. And we met as a result of the community awards. Well, I get involved a lot with community awards or opportunities, the Salvation Army or the Beyond Blue. I look at it and say, you're obliged to. Yeah. Just as a human, you're obliged to.
So how do you integrate that, David, without it becoming such a pressure or such a fear of not continuing to deliver that allows you to live your life well and balanced?
Oh, you don't.
Okay.
Cray 24/7. I don't see that as being independent of it. I see that as a component of it. I love that I get to do that, as well as I am challenged by the responsibility of getting to do that. it feeds my soul as much as it feeds my need to continue to do things. Now, I have a magnificent Bernese mountain dog, and every morning I take Zuri, our dog, down to the park, and I talk to people. There's a guy down there from the SES, very similar sort of backgrounds. There's such a diverse range of people, and many of them are in retirement or heading into retirement, and they're so looking forward to it. And I said to them at one stage, it really frustrates me when somebody comes up to you and congratulates you on retirement. It's like, welcome to obsolescence for me, and I don't plan to ever retire from doing things and challenging myself and seeing if I can make a difference. And I know others don't feel the same way, and that's good. But for me, it's both a joy and a challenge.
David, from the point of view of creating this next level of involvement in life and community, how do you know where to direct your energy? Say, becoming an executive producer of a film, how did you discern that that was something that you needed to do? And how then did you take the challenge of the fear around that and navigate it?
Just a Farmer has been an absolute gift. It's inspired me, it's challenged me. It's something that I have absolutely no experience in at all. And to take on the role has been interesting. But it's also been because it brought together, bizarrely, all of the things that I'd previously done. The movie is primarily about a farmer who suicides as a result of the pressures, the mental health, the financial pressures of being on a farm. And it's also about the family resolves that issue or lives on beyond it. It's how the community gets behind them. And it's inspirational in that it allows people to walk away from it saying, this is authentic and true, but it is also survivable. And survivability is a strange construct within the suicide space. We're talking about those that survive beyond that, the person that's suicide. I've absolutely loved the challenges of that, but it's also that I have had the blessing of a young lady who was involved in writing the movie. She produced the movie and then she starred in the movie. There's an Australian Story episode about Leela McDougall. It's an inspirational one. I would suggest that every person, every young girl should watch it in particular, because this is a statement of progression, how you just never give up and you just keep on fighting through. And she and her husband put up $2 million of their own money, took loans against their cattle and sheep in order to produce a movie that had zero chance of financial success, zero chance of getting it into theatres or getting critical awareness. We've now had 15 awards. We're in the Screen Actors Award. We won Best Actress in Amsterdam, Best Movie in Cannes for independent movies, Buffalo Film Festival. We've won quite a few there. As of yesterday, we had 90 bookings for public screenings in regional communities where there'll be between 150 and 300 people per room that will be coming along and having a Q&A to talk about the issues of death by suicide after it. So when I look at all of the things that we've talked about before, that was my segue into doing this. It was as if it was always meant to be.
What a responsibility you would have had as a producer, David, when Leila and her husband had put up $2 million. So you've got to get this to work, because that's a lot. Tell me about that fear and tell me how you navigated that.
I have always adopted an approach with business that I will always give more than I ask. I really don't ask. I give enough that they will offer. So with contracts and with governments and with business, if you develop the relationships with people, your name comes up to say, well, that's somebody who will help when the need arises. And that's what led to us running a small business bus in disaster areas, our work on Black Saturday, right through from Ash Wednesday. So that aligned. Secondly, because of that, I know a lot of people. My connection list is from local, state and federal government and politicians of all levels, past, present, and from organisations that have worked in that space. I was able to introduce the film to Family Business Australia, Beyond Blue, AusVeg, all of the different organisations that have come in to assist with funding. I was also able to connect them to organisations that could feed out the story and get the PR machine working. I saw it as my unwritten responsibility to see that as many bums on seats happened as possible. I'm thrilled that it has so far. We're getting within sniffing distance of actually breaking even. In the next year or two, she'll make some money out of it.
Wow. I just think we should take a moment, though, to actually acknowledge that piece of work, because anybody that knows anything about Australian films understand that it's one of the most difficult industries to really get a leg in and do something. It's no mean feat what you've achieved. So well done, David.
Thank you for that. It was eye-opening how challenging that space is, and Australia certainly got a lot of work to do to support that industry, and a lot of work to do in the suicide space. I look at the methods is to help in mental health have been the same for so long, that this is a way to reach a new audience and to get them to think about things differently and start conversations that wouldn't have been started otherwise. I take with gratitude your thanks, but the job's not totally complete as yet, and we'll look forward to what happens in the future with it.
I don't know if any job like that's ever really done, David, but to stop and see what you have achieved to this point is quite phenomenal. David, I'm going to flip you right back to your 14-year-old self for a moment. I know we're going a little all over the shop, but I think it builds on the story of who you are. And moving out at the age of 14, and you mentioned there was a fear of loneliness. Tell me, how integral was that experience of fear at such a young age in your ability to cope today?
That was probably one of the most pivotal moments. That decision to move out of what I felt was not a safe or toxic environment. Fortunately, I had a friend who had a library shed in the backyard that I could stay in initially, and then ultimately I moved into my own flat, and I had a teacher friend who worked in what was called at that time triad therapy, where they'd have somebody who's gone through a challenging experience and survived it, somebody who's going through a challenging experience, and the teacher / mediator in between. I became involved in that to help kids that were going through tough times. And many of those kids would drop into my flat, which had foam that I bought from Clark Rubber as the mattresses and the couch. I had one fork, one spoon, one knife, a plate bowl, a vase. One of my dearest friends reflected that he remembered going to my place and we all sat there watching TV, eating peaches out of a vase. The plate and the bowl were all in the sink. So that particular time was tough, but it was formative, and it was also the point where you decide which path you take. I'll reflect back to that in a moment, but I gave a speech about 2 years ago to a group of kids that were challenged with drugs and with challenging family situations, and open with talking about how here I am, a middle-aged white man with a nice car, lives in a nice house, has a beautiful family, great kids, got to travel the world. So you won't be able to relate to me, talking to the audience, and then stepping it back and saying, but this is where I was. So the difference between then and now is your ability to decide when you get to each crossroad, whether you choose the right way or the wrong way. The wrong way can be easy, but ultimately will be harder. And the right way will be harder, but ultimately will be easier. You've got to choose that along the path. That's what my moving out when I did contributed to who I became in my work life.
David, we talked before about what's pulling you through this fear. I'm hearing from a very early age when you made that decision to move out and you said you had two choices. It seemed like now consistently your choices have been around making life better for others. Is that part of a theme that's pulled you through your life?
It has, but I don't want that to sound like where's my wings. I don't feel like that is anything other than what you were put here to do. If you don't do that, then you're failing both yourself and within business, but you're failing yourself within life. It's one of the most satisfying things that you can do to have taken a little bit of the burden off somebody else. You never know what challenges that they've faced that day. So you start out with seeing if you can make their load a little lighter.
You made the comment, what you're put here to do. Tell me about that. Where does that come from? How has that risen to your consciousness, in essence, about why you think that's so critical?
Well, I think that probably came in, first of all, with that triad therapies with the kids. Later in life, when I became CEO of the Small Business Mentoring Service, that organisation is made up of, at that time, about 100, grew to a few hundred mentors who are all retired or semi-retired and who just wanted to give back to a sector that had allowed them some success in their life. That is the greatest gift. But the greatest challenge of my life is to herd 200 CEOs, because they were all CEO type people. So they all thought they knew how to run the organisation better than I did or the board did. God love them, but ultimately my responsibility as the CEO, so you listen to everything and then you decide. And I decided that our purpose for that organisation would be to make a difference wherever we went. We did things like established a unit up at Kinglake in Marysville post the fires. We were there about 48 hours after the fires went through, and we stayed there for 3 years. We didn't have a contract for about the first 4 months because bizarrely government thought, oh no, the fires come and gone, it wasn't really an issue. Then they gradually saw how big this had become. So we were delivering it all, and I said to the mentors that if we're going to do this, we're going to do it regardless of whether we're going to get paid. So I want people that are prepared to volunteer. And I had, without exception, all of them say, we will volunteer, we'll go and do it. They paid their own petrol, paid their own meals, and we covered them as best we could. And that evolved into a reputation with government that we were the go-to people in that space. After that, we got contracts from government to do specifically that's an establish a mobile business centre to help small businesses and address regional and rural areas and run clinics in 60 councils, and all of those things was born of that initial statement that we're here. Our primary purpose is to do good and to take a weight off.
That to me is about what a leader does. They show the way, and that's effectively what your group did up there in that situation, is that they showed how it could be done, and then it was much easier for people to come on board. That's another theme that you've been talking about. If you give more and show more, then people will come, they'll join you.
Yeah.
So tell me about that. What gives you the courage to do that? Because being a leader comes with a lot of fear, because you're a bit of an outlier sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. And in particular for the CEO of any organisation by default can't declare weaknesses to their board.
Yes.
When that's the case, you don't go into the board and say, I'm really struggling with X. So you go in there confidently saying, there is no problem. We've solutions. I've got plans running on forever. And I always adopted the approach, and this is both a strength and a curse for me, is that I pre-plan things so much that I sit there and go through a board meeting and pre-assess what each person is going to say, what pathways I'll go down, so that I'll have an answer to each of their questions before they ask them. Invariably, when you go into a board meeting and somebody will say, well, here's a question without notice, and they'll throw something at you and you flick to the next slide and it gives them the answer and you move on. I had board members say to me some years afterwards, you bastard, you knew what I was going to say. Yeah? And I felt a deep sense of pride in being able to do that. But it is a big load, because you have to sit and work through, extrapolate all of those things out. I see that as a leadership quality, and it's something that is hard-earned, and something that I don't know if I'm good at it, bad at it, or otherwise, but I am who I am, and I'm pretty pleased with how it went.
Mm. You've clearly learned, David, to navigate tricky scenario situations or adversities where people are not willing to see the big picture as you do and understand how to work with them. Was there a time in that situation when you were the CEO of the Small Business Mentoring Group where there was fear that you would not achieve?
Not really. I had a board up on my wall that I'd written that it's amazing what you can achieve if you don't care who gets the credit. I think that's a really important statement to live by. If we went into any scenario, and having said this couldn't happen probably in other organisations, but the very nature of an organisation with 200 CEO level volunteers allows you to say, no, I don't feel like we couldn't do anything. We could do everything. We just sometimes were challenged with convincing government at times. The fact that we had 200 different people with 200 different backgrounds and levels of experience, I never feared that we couldn't achieve what we were setting out to. I just feared the frustration of getting funding support to allow us to do so.
And that frustration, the fear of you not being able to get what you wanted, how do you navigate something like that in a world where you're trying to convince people of what you know is really worthwhile, whether that be the film or even your talk at the United Nations? You're in a position, as you say, of power, but also there's that fear of not being able to get to that moment where there's realization of what you're trying to say.
It's probably the greatest frustration throughout all of my career is that you always have to sit in a room and try to sell awareness of what the issue is, that you can lead them to come to the conclusion and get them to say, why don't we do what you wanted them to say you were going to do? That's one of the great challenges, particularly with governments, because they want to count everything. I recently had a discussion with a friend of mine who's involved in support for regional areas, and he commented, and you would have heard this phrase before, the difference between the fence at the top of the cliff versus the ambulance at the bottom. Governments and councils and all of those bodies wish to count the numbers, and you can't count something that hasn't happened yet. When you push for preventative actions to be put into place, that's not measurable, but they can count the number of bodies that are at the bottom of the cliff, and they can count the number that you've picked up and been able to get to walk again. It's a constant frustration, and I don't really know how to address that one.
It's never easy. You're dealing with a lot of different perceptions and beliefs and a range of things that really it's well out of your control, in essence.
Yeah.
So, and that's the point I'd like to tackle from your point of view, very, very personal point of view, is this issue between control and fear.
Mm-hmm.
And what's within your control and what's outside of your control, and how does fear play a part in all of that for you?
Well, so my fears make me seek control by over analysing and over addressing it. I scenario manage, and my life consists of the 14 odd seconds of sleep I have a night, because what happens is if I have a big meeting or if I have a presentation to do the night before, the day before, the week before, I'll be planning and saying, well, what if it goes this part? Pre-programmed my mind. That is how my fear addresses that issue. And that's not a way for other people. That's just a way for me. I see so many confident public speakers and so many amazing professionals and executives and people from all walks of life. But I haven't walked in their shoes, so I don't know that they're not feeling exactly the same as me behind the scenes. But I look at them and I assume not. And I know that they look at me and assume not.
Interesting, it's that veil we put up in front of ourselves, isn't it? That I'm okay. Nobody knows what's really going on inside at all.
David, this has been a theme that you've managed various fears or various challenges in your life by such precise control of the elements and the variables. Has there ever been a time where you've had to face a fear without any control and you've found yourself on the other side of it or partway through it or through it and realised you can do it without that much element of control?
No, I've never found a time when I haven't made the control. Having said that, I've found times where I haven't won and I haven't felt like all of the controls that I've put in haven't been able to get me there. With battles with government, with pushing for support, in particular the emotional side. We did a lot of work in Kinglake, and a lot of that was working with people that were so frustrated with the system that wouldn't allow them support without filling out 1,000 documents. I fought long and hard with government that our mentors should be given the right to fill out the documents on behalf of people, and for those people to sign off that you can hand it out to the salvos and to the Red Cross. The reason I raised that one is because there was so much out of my control on that. There were so many agencies, there were so many good-meaning people, and then there were so many tragic stories. Commented to mentors in the past that no one that worked within that space will ever be the same. That we would drive down the mountain each night, pull over to the side of the road. I'd had a cry with whoever I was up there with. We would all have a cry together, and we continued the drive down, and then we drive back up the next day with the knowledge that we will come home that night and have a cry on the way home. The heal the healer part comes into play there, and I got psychologists to come and work with the mentors to help them through some of those parts. It is to my eternal frustration that there are times that I could have done things, but I was blocked from doing them. No matter how much I prepared, that wouldn't have been allowed by the powers to be.
It's quite a heavy burden you place on yourself to feel like you've got to navigate and control that when it's uncontrollable. I totally understand and fully appreciate that level of preparation or that level of knowing before you go into something. It negates a possible outcome that you're not wanting. And yet, in this situation with the fires, there was no way you could. And it sounds like it was a heavy toll on you and also the mentors. If you went back to that time again, would you do it any differently to take that level of burden off yourself and also the others that you were involved in?
No, I don't think there's anything that I look back on probably in life where I think if I got a redo on that one, because you just got to say, okay, well, this is my job. Right? And if there's things that you want, when you weren't going to win them by another path either, because I thought through all of those paths the night before. If I felt that I'd gone through that and hadn't tried enough, then I'd have regret. But I don't have regret because I know that I tried enough. Also, the path to insanity. If you go back and rehash it too much, you woulda, coulda, shouldas. And as it is, of all the things I ever lost, I miss my mind the most. I think there's part of you that always feels that the weight of these moments is too heavy, the mountains are too hard to climb, and then you lift them and you climb them, and then you get by them, and then they're yesterday's, not tomorrow's.
Wow. I just hear how driven and focused and inspiring you are to listen to. And I know Anne's already asked you to go back to your 14-year-old self. You again mentioned loneliness. Has that played out in other times in your life? If so, do you approach it with that same very controlled, making sure things are in place when it does come up? Because it's something that I know isn't talked about a lot, whether you approach it in a similar way.
When you say people talking about it, people don't talk about their mental health. People don't talk about their fears. People should talk about their mental health and their fears. That's why I work with Beyond Blue, because it's that opportunity to do so. Having said that, that doesn't mean that you will resolve those fears or the loneliness. I remember probably 20 odd years ago, I had a very open discussion with my son where I said that I can't remember a time where I haven't woken up a little bit scared. And my son cried, we had a bit of a hug and we talked about it. We talked about the fact that isn't that for everyone? Don't we all, to some degree, wake up and think, I'm scared about whether I'm going to have enough money to live on when I retire. I'm scared of whether I get Alzheimer's. I'm scared of whether I can pay my rent this month. We all live every day with those tiny little niggling fears. No one gets out of this alive. We've all got to survive it. And that's all I think I've done is survived it.
It almost sounds to me, David, that you've actually seen fear as quite a strong motivator for you. Yep. It's actually allowed you to move towards it, as you said. I'm not going to let it stop you. How do you see that?
Yeah, I think that that's very much the case. Having said that, when I retired 2 years ago and then became a movie executive, I said to my wife, in fact, I promised my wife, I was no longer going to do any public speaking because it's something I've hated all my life. And therefore, I'm giving myself permission not to do it anymore. Since that time, I've done it a number of times. And again, you face the fear and you say yes. But I think I've probably got to an age and maturity where I know what damage it causes or what weight it places, and so I feel like I can encourage others around me to do it. I'm more management and manipulative now, where I'll get those around me and couch it in the fact that I'm elevating them up to have the opportunity to do so, when in fact I'm cowardly running away from doing it myself.
I don't think anybody could ever call you a coward, David. I don't think that's one word that would be appropriate. But what I am curious to you to talk a little bit more about is what damage does it do to you? How does it impact you that you really don't want to do it anymore?
Yeah, it does. It literally does. I've always felt huge stresses going into public speaking type situations. And I think this goes back to when I was 17, I was with Easy Walking Shoes. 18, I became advertising manager for Kmart Footwear. And then I got the job of being the buyer. They moved me into buying for the children's footwear and in particular school shoes. Sounds a bizarre segue, but the issues that I've had with public speaking were born of that. I was handed the portfolio of children's shoes. One of those categories was school shoes. The previous buyer hadn't bought any school shoes in time for back to school. And the company put me on a roadshow around the country to go and explain that to each of the managers of all of the Kmarts around the country. It was the public flogging tour of that generation, where no matter where I was going to be abused. From that point forward, I thought, this public speaking thing's not great. There's no real positive side to that. Now, I know that was a unique situation, and I know many of the public speaking components that I've had to do have all been very, very positive. But the little me inside me always remembers that one as being a pivotal, scarring moment that still yells in my ear occasionally.
Given that we're talking to the little me, that
Yeah.
leads me to our final wrap-up questions, and we could honestly keep on talking to you. There's so many other things, and I would love to hear about, David. But knowing what you know now, what message would you give your 10-year-old self, given the life experiences and what you get to do now in your current roles?
The first one is that there are enough obstacles in life without you being one of them. That you don't need to be an obstacle to yourself. You'd get out of your own way. Second is talk to yourself as if you were talking to someone you love. All too often, we're far too hard on ourselves, and we should give ourselves a bit of a break. Next one is, secret to getting ahead is you've got to get started. So there's so many things that don't happen because of procrastination, and there is no success that's ever happened without you actually getting off your ass and going out and getting it. And lastly, and this is probably my hallmark, if you can't beat fear, do it scared.
Love it. Absolutely love it. So overall, what's your whole life experience of facing fear head on, being motivated by fear? What's the greatest gift that this has given you?
It's given me everything. The fact that I get to live the life I do, I'm hugely grateful. I have a wife that's the love of my life. I've got 2 wonderful children and 4 grandchildren. I have a few lines that I've got written down here that are valuable to me. That you should remember that your job is the dream of the unemployed, your house is the dream of the homeless, your smile is the dream of the depressed, and your health is the dream of the sick. That you should always, always, always be grateful. That's probably the biggest thing that I could suggest to anyone. Just be grateful.
Yeah. And that comes through so clearly in how you've spoken of each opportunity and each time you've faced fear, it just has come through in your whole discussion with Anne and I. Thank you so much, David. And it has been an absolute pleasure hearing everything that you have done and all the lives that you've touched, David. It has been up to us. We're certainly very grateful for your time. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Okay, that's our episode for today of What's Fear Got to Do with It. Thanks so much for your company. We hope you found it insightful, left you with amazing tips from our guests, and some great points for you to reflect on. Hit subscribe to follow us on your favourite podcast platform and leave a review. We'd love to know your thoughts. Maybe you would like to be a guest, or you know someone, or even don't know someone, but you'd love to hear their story. Reach out to us on Insta at whatsfear_podcast or email us at info@whatsfear.com. And all of today's guest details, including their tips, are in the show notes below. So until next time, from Jo and I, stay curious, take care, and keep the conversation going.